Maya Ellison was just mopping the floor when she solved the AI puzzle that defeated every genius in America. The next morning, the code she wrote in chalk was erased. Her name wiped like she was never there. No ID. No degree. Just brilliance they refused to believe could come from a janitor's daughter. Now the university calls it a hoax. But what if she was the only real genius in the room? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The algorithm loomed large on the whiteboard. An unsolvable beast sprawled across 10 glossy panels, guarded by decades of intellectual elitism. The university's brightest minds stared at it daily, scratching heads, offering guesses, coding into the night, only to fail. Professor Dwight Mallory, the campus's AI prodigy turned celebrity, introduced it as a final project designed to defeat the best artificial intelligence programs in the country. But when those machines failed, the algorithm became a monument, not to science, but to supremacy. It wasn't just any AI sequence. It was recursive, multi-layered, intentionally incomplete, a test of pure intuition and insight. Mallory, standing before packed lecture halls and broadcasted webinars, made sure to underline that no ordinary thinker could possibly crack it. Let the machines fail. He smirked during an international tech symposium. If AI gives up, what chance does anyone else have? And yet every night, as the classrooms emptied and the tech elite went home to polish their resumes, one figure lingered in the shadows. A girl barely 21, dressed in janitor's overalls, pushing a cart full of rags and bleach. Her name was Maya Ellison, and to the professors, she didn't exist. Her mother, Lorraine, had cleaned those same halls for 18 years. In silence, Maya walked behind her, observing what no one thought she had the right to understand. Her eyes traced every line of code, every pattern on the board, every arrogant scribble left by overconfident students. By day, they talked about building ethical machines. By night, they stepped over Maya like she was part of the floor. They never wondered what she saw. They never asked what she thought. What they didn't know was that Maya had been studying the problem for months, reconstructing the logic on scratch paper, imagining outcomes, testing loops in her mind. No formal access, no tutoring, just instinct, raw and refined through repetition. What made the algorithm unsolvable wasn't its complexity. It was its framing, a logic puzzle wrapped in a philosophy of exclusion. It required a perspective outside the academic elite. Mallory didn't create it to be solved. He created it to demonstrate that machines, and by extension the minds who designed them, were still superior. What he didn't anticipate was that Maya's mind wasn't a machine. The irony: while Mallory mocked AI for failing to mimic genius, the real genius mopped the floor behind him. Every smudge on the whiteboard became a clue. Every discarded note, a breadcrumb. She picked them up, pieced them together, and in time, saw something no one else did. A rhythm. The math had music in it, and Maya knew the melody by heart. It wasn't about equations. It was about perspective. And Maya's perspective was forged in invisibility. As the AI community buzzed with failure, as Mallory basked in the attention of having outsmarted even the most advanced machine learning models, a new solution was quietly forming, not in the computer labs, but in a janitor's notebook. One rainy night, when even the security guards had gone home early, Maya stood alone in the classroom. Her mother had finished early. The halls were silent. She stared at the whiteboard. She picked up a piece of chalk. She began to write. But someone had been secretly watching, and she was no ordinary observer. Maya Ellison never chose to grow up inside the walls of Ivy Ridge University. The campus chose her. While other kids learned to ride bikes in front of suburban houses, Maya learned to push a squeaky janitor's cart down marble hallways that echoed with the footsteps of ambition. Her mother, Lorraine Ellison, had worked the night shift for nearly 2 decades, her hands forever smelling of bleach and her knees aching from years of scrubbing floors that would never remember her. Lorraine never complained. She told Maya, "This place ain't ours, but we'll walk through it like it don't scare us." The university didn't know Maya existed. Not really. She wasn't enrolled, had no student ID, no digital footprint in their pristine systems, but she was there, every evening, sweeping around the heels of students who looked through her, professors who never learned her name, and administrators who locked doors behind her mother, with the same indifference they locked out generations of people like them. It was in those quiet hours that Maya began to learn. She had no laptop, no login, No desk. Only scraps. Pages torn from discarded textbooks, notes dropped by rushing students, printouts mistakenly tossed in the trash. Her mother would call out, "Leave that alone, baby." But Maya couldn't. She collected them like treasure. Binary strings, syntax errors, algorithm trees. Alien at first, but over time familiar. She'd flatten them out at home on their small kitchen table and stare for hours, teaching herself how the logic bent and twisted. She was 8 when she first understood what an if-then statement meant. Not just in code, but in life. If she cleaned the halls without being noticed, then she could read the code on the whiteboard. If she acted invisible, then maybe the knowledge left behind would stick to her. The racism at Ivy Ridge was never loud. It was in the micro movements. The way students would hold their bags a little tighter when they passed her. The way professors would say "young lady" with a kind smile, but never speak to her mother. It was in the silence that followed, every time someone realized Maya wasn't a student. It was in the awkward pause, the nod, the quick retreat. Students joked that the janitor's daughter might be good with trash data. They meant it as a laugh. But Maya took the phrase and turned it into a mantra. She was good with trash data, because trash was all they left her. She began doing the unthinkable. Solving old problems. Equations that others had scribbled out in frustration, Maya would rework on the back of napkins. Logic trees, half erased on classroom boards. She memorized and reconstructed at home using crayons and free paper from donation bins. She didn't have simulation software, so she visualized everything. Her imagination became the processor. At 15, she solved a simplified model of the traveling salesman problem, using an original heuristic she created in her head. She tried to show it to a teaching assistant once, a young white man who looked bored the moment she approached. "That's cute," he said, brushing past her, "but this is grad-level stuff." By 16, she stopped trying to show anyone. Her brilliance grew in silence. Lorraine noticed the late nights, the pages of hand-drawn syntax, the constant murmurs to herself as Maya walked the halls. She worried. "You know that ain't your future, right?" She'd whisper one night, while folding towels. "Them kids, they got the world waiting for 'em. You got me, and a mop." But Maya smiled. "That's not all I've got, Mama." She had hope. And hunger. Then came the day the university unveiled Mallory's algorithm. It was displayed like a monument, written in cascading code across the main AI lecture hall. Complex. Condescending. Immovable. The challenge was issued to every AI institute across the country. Solve this recursive sequence and redefine the future of machine intelligence. Maya watched from behind the cleaning cart, as students gathered, pointing, whispering, snapping photos. Mallory stood at the center, arms folded, grinning like a man who knew he'd built a fortress no one could breach. "It's the kind of problem that separates the real thinkers from the rest," he said to a cluster of visiting scholars. "I expect we'll be waiting years." Maya stepped closer. The chalk dust from her mop left faint trails behind her. She stared at the lines. It felt like listening to a familiar melody being played out of tune. Something was wrong, not with the code's difficulty, but with the assumptions it made. It expected the solver to think like a machine. Linear, predictable, cold. But Maya had never thought like that. Her mind moved sideways. She saw rhythm in chaos. She didn't approach problems with control. She danced with them. Mallory's code didn't intimidate her. It intrigued her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the code over and over in her head. The loops, the recursive calls, the exits. They whispered to her. She saw gaps, not mistakes. Exactly, but patterns masked as noise. She took a crumpled napkin and began to draw. She didn't stop for hours. What AI couldn't finish, she had just begun. At school, the algorithm was becoming legend. Online forums debated it endlessly. Students formed teams to crack it. Professors published speculative papers. Mallory relished the attention. And in a small apartment above a laundromat, a girl with no formal education rewrote the puzzle's skeleton in pencil. Then came the twist no one expected. As Maya refined her notes, she realized something alarming. Part of the code felt familiar. Too familiar. A nested logic function she'd seen once before, not on campus, but in an old book buried in the janitor's closet. One her mother had rescued from a trash bin, labeled Obsolete Archives. It was written by a black mathematician, Dr. Harold Denton, who'd been denied tenure decades ago. His work had vanished from academic memory. Mallory hadn't invented the algorithm. He'd stolen it, cleaned it up, rebranded it, added noise, and weaponized it as intellectual gatekeeping. Maya's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about solving a problem anymore. This was about truth. About reclaiming brilliance buried under decades of institutional racism. She knew what she had to do. And one day, she saw the impossible code, and it wasn't impossible to her. The buzz around Mallory's unsolvable algorithm spread far beyond Ivy Ridge University. Within weeks, it became an online sensation, a kind of intellectual riddle that both humbled and glorified the world's most powerful machines. MIT tried, Stanford tried, even a Google DeepMind team publicly admitted defeat after thousands of compute hours. The media dubbed it the algorithm that outsmarted machines. Mallory basked in the fame. For him, every failed attempt was another validation of his brilliance, proof that his creation transcended both code and comprehension. But in a dimly lit apartment 2 miles from campus, a young woman with second-hand notebooks and a chipped pencil saw something everyone else missed. Maya Ellison sat by the window, the city lights spilling across her scattered notes. Her mind worked quietly, methodically, and without the arrogance that blinded the others. She didn't see the algorithm as an enemy to conquer. She saw it as a language trying to be understood, one written by someone who never expected her to read it. She recognized it instantly. Bias in the bones of the logic. The recursive model wasn't just mathematically incomplete, it was philosophically biased. It relied on assumptions that excluded flexibility, creativity, and uncertainty, the very traits that made human thought so powerful. It was a reflection of Mallory himself, rigid, elitist, built to exclude. Maya pressed her pencil harder into the paper. The loops, those endless, elegant repetitions that caused machines to stall, weren't flaws, they were traps, designed to reject intuitive reasoning. Mallory had designed an algorithm only his kind of mind could even attempt to navigate. But Maya saw a crack in its armor. Her heart raced as she filled page after page. The recursive error that caused every AI to give up wasn't random. It was triggered by an assumption about the data's starting bias. If that assumption was flipped, inverted, reframed, the system wouldn't crash, it would evolve. Machines fail because they think too fast, she whispered to herself. People fail because they think too small. Her mother peeked in from the doorway. "Baby, you still up? It's near morning." "I'm close, Mama," Maya said without looking up. "It's talking to me." Lorraine smiled, weary, but proud. "You always were the one to listen, when nobody else could." Maya's eyes burned from fatigue, but the fire inside her only grew brighter. She didn't have the tools, but she had the instinct. What the world dismissed as impossible, she saw as incomplete, a door half closed, and she was tired of waiting for permission to open it. Meanwhile, in online forums, the conversation was vicious. Thousands of coders debated the algorithm's impossibility, some obsessing over its elegance, others frustrated by its cruelty. One thread, posted by a faceless user, caught Maya's attention. "This problem's too abstract for women, or minorities. It's designed for structured reasoning, not emotional logic." Maya's chest tightened. That single sentence said everything she'd ever lived. The world didn't just underestimate people like her, it erased them from the narrative of intelligence itself. For days she stayed up late, sketching logic patterns on old newspaper margins. She couldn't run simulations. She didn't have access to a computer capable of processing recursive data structures, so she simulated everything in her head. Each function call, each loop, each memory state. She used rhythm tapping her pencil to mark iteration depth, humming sequences, until she could feel when the system would fail. That was Maya's secret weapon, intuition coded in rhythm. Where the machine saw dead ends, she saw breath. She built a new recursive flow, one that treated failure as a valid outcome, rather than an exception. It was revolutionary, a model that accepted imperfection, just as life did. Days blurred into nights. Her mother grew worried. "You can't fight a machine, Maya," Lorraine said gently, one morning laying a plate of eggs beside her. "They don't see you and they don't care to." "I'm not fighting a machine," Maya replied softly, without looking up. "I'm fighting the idea that only some people get to be called smart." At the same time, the academic world was descending into chaos. Mallory's name trended on social media. Podcasts debated whether his algorithm should even be studied. He was labeled a visionary, The man who built a puzzle too deep for even artificial intelligence. But in that same week, the first murmurs of doubt began to surface. A few independent coders questioned whether the problem was artificially impossible. Mallory, quick to defend his ego, released a statement claiming that no serious mind would find meaning in chasing dead code. When Maya read that line, something in her hardened. No serious mind. He had written that to erase people like her before they even tried. She flipped to a clean page and began again. No longer careful. No longer timid. The pencil scraped the page like thunder as she rewrote the logic with a single alteration, replacing a conditional loop with an adaptive recursion call. It was small, invisible, almost, but it changed everything. When she traced it through, her breath caught. The code didn't collapse this time. It unfolded. Each pass stabilized the previous error, instead of rejecting it. The machine, in theory, wouldn't crash. It would learn. It would feel. Mallory's bias had blinded him to the one truth. Maya had lived her whole life. Broken systems don't fail. They adapt. By dawn, she had a working solution. Not perfect, not polished, but alive. She stared at the paper for a long time, trembling. She didn't feel pride. She felt fury, because she knew what would happen if she showed it. They wouldn't believe her. They'd say she copied it, stole it, misunderstood it, and they'd keep their world locked. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Lorraine sat across the table, watching her daughter's eyes, wide, haunted, glowing. "You solved it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Maya nodded. "I think I did." "Then why you look like you seen a ghost?" Maya's voice cracked. "Because I know what they'll do when they find out." For the first time in her life, Lorraine saw fear in her daughter, not of failure but of being right. Maya folded the pages neatly and tucked them into a plastic grocery bag. She wasn't ready to reveal them. Not yet. She needed to understand it fully, to make sure there was no doubt, no flaw, no easy dismissal. She would finish it quietly, perfectly, and then she'd sign her name, not to be seen, but to be known. That night, she returned to the university. The halls were dark, empty. The whiteboard still bore the ghost of Mallory's algorithm, under layers of chalk residue. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Maya picked up a piece of chalk and began to transcribe her solution across the wall, line by line, sequence by sequence. Her hand shook, but her mind was clear. For the first time, she wasn't mimicking brilliance. She was brilliant. When she finished, she stepped back, staring at the pattern glowing under the pale blue light. It was beautiful. It was hers. She didn't just want to solve it, she wanted to leave her name in the source code. The classroom at Ivy Ridge was a cathedral of knowledge. 12-foot ceilings, walls lined with algorithm posters, and a pristine floor that glowed under moonlight when no one walked it. At 3:07 a.m., it was completely still, save for the quiet scratch of chalk across the board. Maya Ellison stood on the edge of a step stool, her fingers dusted white, heart hammering in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, but her mind was alive, electric with clarity. One by one, she etched each sequence of her algorithm onto the board, fully committing her handwritten logic path in crisp, deliberate strokes. The chalk hissed as it hit the surface, a whisper of resistance to the silence surrounding her. The code unfolded across the panels like poetry. Every recursive loop that had confounded machines now flowed like breath. Every flawed assumption that had stopped elite minds cold was rebuilt through intuition. Maya had translated what the machines couldn't, not because she was trained differently, but because she had lived differently. Her version didn't force outcomes. It allowed flexibility. It adapted like a living thing. She had embedded her worldview into every variable, not as rebellion, but as resolution. For the first time, the algorithm had heart. It wasn't a riddle anymore. It was a revolution. When the last symbol was drawn, she stepped down slowly, her arms aching. She stood at the center of the room, looking up at what she had created. It took her breath away. Then, at the bottom corner, where Mallory once stamped his name, she wrote 2 letters in tiny, nearly imperceptible script. No flourish, no claim, just truth. Maya took a long breath and turned to leave. Her shoes echoed against the tile as she rolled her cleaning cart down the hallway, the light behind her fading as the auto lights shut off. Row by row. She didn't expect recognition. She didn't even hope for it. She just wanted to leave something behind that couldn't be ignored. By 7:00 a.m., the campus buzzed like a beehive. The AI lecture hall, once a graveyard of failed ideas, had become ground zero for mystery and speculation. The whiteboard, now filled edge to edge in clear functional logic, drew in students like moths. Whispers flew. Who did this? Is this a new version?
Wait, is it correct?
Several students began checking the sequences line by line, fingers tracing the chalk like it was sacred text. Within minutes, someone ran a simulation on their laptop using the translated structure, and the code ran. It didn't break. The loop sustained itself. It learned. Chaos erupted. Crowds gathered. Phones came out. Theories bounced from wall to wall. Some assumed a visiting AI fellow had come through and casually dropped a bombshell before disappearing. Others joked that it was a stunt, maybe a prank, but no one could deny this was working code. Then someone pointed out the initials at the bottom. "M, that's all it says?" a voice asked. "Yeah. Who the hell is ME?" The murmurs thickened. ME became a legend before lunch. But not everyone was amused. Professor Dwight Mallory arrived shortly after 8 a.m., his coffee still steaming and his mood sharp. He pushed through the crowd, demanding to know who had defaced his algorithm. One student, flushed with excitement, tried to explain that the new logic worked, that someone had solved the unsolvable. Mallory's face froze. He looked at the board, studied it for no more than a second, then turned sharply and hissed, "Erase it." The student recoiled. "But Professor..." "Erase it." The custodian on shift had just arrived, and was pulled in, reluctantly, to wipe down what he knew had taken hours to construct. The students protested, some begging for just a few more minutes, others trying to snap pictures. But Mallory, red-faced and livid, stood in the doorway blocking their view. Unauthorized, he declared. "This isn't scholarship. This is graffiti." By 8:30 a.m., the board was clean again. The crowd dispersed in disappointment and confusion. Rumors spread that security had been called. No names were given, no leads pursued, no recognition granted. Because no one considered that a janitor's daughter might be the author of something beautiful. No one believed that Maya Ellison, the girl with no badge, no lab access, no degree, could be capable of solving the problem that every genius had failed. It was easier to believe in ghosts than to confront that truth. But not everyone walked away empty-handed. One freshman, lanky, quiet, and slightly late to the scene, had arrived just before the commotion. His name was Theo Marchand, a scholarship student from Detroit, who had been too shy to speak in class and too poor to fit in. While others debated who the genius could be, Theo didn't talk, he observed. And he had snapped a single photo before the board was wiped. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. But something about the initials struck him.
Louis.
It felt deliberate. Theo spent the rest of the morning staring at the image on his cracked phone screen. He couldn't stop replaying it in his mind. The symmetry, the recursion, the rhythm. Whoever wrote this wasn't just smart. They were aware. There was intent in every line. In his programming class later that day, as Professor Mallory walked past his desk, Theo looked up. Their eyes met for just a second. Mallory's were calm, rehearsed. But behind them, Theo saw something else. Fear. That night, while walking back to his dorm, Theo passed the janitorial closet near the west wing. The door was cracked. He saw someone inside, a girl sweeping slowly, humming softly to herself. She had a notebook tucked beneath her hoodie. The hallway was empty. His footsteps echoed. He turned to look at her, just for a second longer than politeness allowed. She glanced up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke, but Theo's gaze dropped to her hoodie, faded, but with letters barely visible on the sleeve. ELF. He blinked. Wait. He looked again. She was already walking away, mop in hand. His mind was spinning. Could it be? Back in his room, Theo opened the photo again. He zoomed into the bottom right corner. Money. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered aloud, "Who are you?" But a freshman named Theo had snapped the photo, and he wanted to know who Emmy was. Theo Macklin wasn't built for attention. He was the kind of freshman who sat in the back of every classroom, kept his laptop stickers minimal, and typed code like a composer writing symphonies in silence. He didn't come to Ivy Ridge to be seen. He came to escape, to build, to finally be among people who spoke his language. Logic, systems, precision. He hadn't expected to find a mystery, and he sure hadn't expected it to come from chalk. The photo he'd taken of the board kept calling to him, even when he closed his phone, even when he tried to focus on class. The algorithm wasn't just accurate, it was different. It breathed. Where Mallory's model was rigid and authoritative, this one had movement. Theo didn't just read it. He felt it. It adapted, responded, reacted. It listened. After hours of studying it line by line, Theo began to realize something humbling. Whoever had written this wasn't just smart. They had challenged the very core of computational thinking. He tried reverse tracking the photo online. No hits. No matching datasets. None of the known names in the AI lab claimed authorship. Professors either refused to comment or brushed it off as an unfortunate incident of graffiti. Mallory's silence was telling. The university wanted the story to die. But Theo couldn't let it go. Not when someone out there, someone brilliant, had just changed the field, and no one seemed to care. He spent days tracing the initials ME, asking quiet questions, watching who lingered too long outside the lecture halls. At night, he reviewed campus logs, janitorial schedules, student directories. Nothing fit until one evening, after a late coding session, he passed the west hallway and heard a familiar hum. It was subtle, soft, a rhythm, and he recognized it instantly, the same pattern embedded in the recursive loop from the board. He slowed his pace. The door to the janitor's closet was slightly ajar again. Inside stood a young woman in overalls, sweeping quietly. Her movements were calm, but her eyes darted up as he passed. For a moment, their gazes locked. Theo felt a strange jolt, not of attraction but of realization. He'd seen those eyes in the code, that weight, that knowing. He noticed the old hoodie again, frayed along the edges, but the stitched letters clearer now. Ellison. Me, he whispered under his breath. He didn't stop her. He didn't ask anything. He just walked back to his dorm and opened the photo again. Zoomed in. Studied the signature. She had written her name in the corner like someone apologizing for existing. The next day, he asked a custodian her name. Just a casual question, feigning curiosity. The woman looked at him strangely, then said, "That's Maya, works evenings. Her mom's been with us forever." Theo didn't need to ask more. It hit him all at once. A black janitor's daughter had solved what entire machine learning teams had failed to crack, and the world didn't even bother to ask if it could be her, because the world already believed it couldn't. He went to class that afternoon, in a haze. Mallory gave a lecture on intellectual ownership and the dangers of academic hoaxes. His words were icy, targeted, and performed. Theo sat frozen. He looked around the room at his peers, nodding, laughing, blind. Then came the voice inside him. Do something. But what could he do? He was a freshman. On scholarship. Still finding his footing. He wasn't sure if speaking up would help, or only make Maya's life harder. The university had buried the incident so quickly, so cleanly. Would they retaliate? Would they call it slander? Would they turn Maya into a villain for simply being visible? That night he sat at his desk scrolling through posts in tech forums. One in particular caught his eye. There's no way someone outside academia solved that.
No?
Probably a hoax by someone, wanting attention. If the semi-person was real, they'd have come forward by now. Theo stared at the comment, hands clenched. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. All he could see was that quiet girl, sweeping dust off the floors she already owned in Brilliance. The next morning, he made a choice. He opened his phone, found the photo, and uploaded it to Twitter, adding only 6 words. Maya Ellison solved it. Remember her. He clicked post. He waited, silent. Then, then 2. Then a comment. Wait, what? Within an hour, the post had over 3,000 retweets. The photo was being dissected in AI groups, reshared by grad students, and praised by coders who recognized what they were seeing. Some still called it fake. Others began running simulations and confirming it worked. People started asking, who is Maya Ellison? Theo watched the storm brew, heart racing. He didn't expect the university to respond. But they did. By noon, a statement was posted on the Ivy Ridge website. The university has no record of a student named Maya Ellison enrolled in our computer science program. We are currently investigating the origins of the code in question and ask the public to refrain from speculation. No mention of janitorial staff. No mention of her connection to the university. Just cold, defensive detachment. Theo slammed his laptop shut. He knew what they were doing. Delegitimizing her through omission. Turning her into a ghost. But the post was already viral. Maya's name had been spoken. Suddenly, news outlets were calling. Tech forums were exploding. Black STEM communities online were rallying behind her. From mops to machines, one headline read, "The janitor's daughter who outsmarted AI." And then the twist. That evening, Theo received a DM from someone anonymous. No name, no profile photo, just a file attachment and a message.
I was in the AI department. I saw what she wrote. They deleted the logs. But I saved the session data. Don't stop.
Theo opened the file. It was a screenshot from the university's internal server, showing a late-night login from an unregistered device, time-stamped. Metadata included. User. M. The uploaded logic matched Maya's code line for line. Proof. His chest tightened. He wasn't just right. He was holding the very data the university was pretending didn't exist. And now he had a decision. Send it to the media, or go to Maya first. He chose the latter. He printed the screenshot, folded it, and that night, he waited outside the west hallway. When she appeared, mop in hand, he approached. "Hey," he said quietly. "I know it's you." She froze. He held up the paper, eyes steady. "I believe you." Her lips parted, but no words came. "You changed everything," he said, "and I'm going to help you make them see it." Maya blinked back sudden tears.
Why?
She whispered. "Why you?" Theo smiled softly. "Because someone needs to start listening to people the world refuses to see." Theo made a choice to upload the chalkboard photo and credit it to Maya Ellison. It began with a ripple. Theo's tweet had barely settled into the algorithm before the floodgates broke open. At first it was just coders, small-time engineers and undergrad computer science majors, reposting the image and marveling at the logic. But then came the bloggers, the STEM influencers, the Twitter think pieces, the hashtags. Me solved. Janitor's daughter. Brilliance has no bad. By morning, the headline had already reached national attention. Janitor's daughter solves unsolvable AI code at elite university. Maya hadn't seen it yet. She was mopping the same floors she always had, humming softly to herself, unaware that her name, the name she had whispered into chalk in the dead of night, was now ricocheting across the internet.
Theo didn't tell her right away. He watched it unfold from his dorm, eyes locked on the screen, fingers twitching with nervous energy. He knew it would spread, but he didn't expect this.
At 8:02 a.m., the first major outlet picked it up. A tech magazine that compared her code structure to quantum-aware modeling. At 9:30 a.m., a local news station called her a self-taught coding prodigy. By 10:45 a.m., Black STEM Twitter had erupted in support, and Maya's name was trending in 4 states. But as the truth gained traction, the resistance snapped back like a whip. By noon, Ivy Ridge University released a press statement that felt more like a warning than a clarification. At this time, the university has no record of a student or faculty member named Maya Ellison involved in our artificial intelligence research. No formal submission of the algorithm has been logged in our system. The authenticity of this claim is unverified, and we encourage the public not to spread misinformation. No apology, no curiosity, no acknowledgement, just bureaucratic distancing. Then came Mallory's contribution, a separate statement, colder and sharper. While we encourage creativity from all backgrounds, no unregistered individual has submitted any verifiable work to our department. We urge media outlets to exercise caution in giving credence to viral fabrications. He never said her name, never referenced the algorithm directly, but the implication was clear. She didn't exist. The comment sections turned into war zones. Supporters posted screenshots, analysis, code breakdowns. Others responded with venom. Anonymous users called Maya a fraud, a liar, a diversity pawn. One post read, "A janitor's kid solving what top AI couldn't. Come on, this is just another woke fairy tale." Maya saw it all by accident. She'd gone to the library to check the free access computers and found the homepage already open to a news article about her. At first she didn't react, just stood there, motionless, staring at her name in bold. Her photo wasn't there, but the world had begun building her identity piece by piece. Then the librarian, a man who had never spoken more than a grunt to her, leaned over the desk and muttered, "You people just can't be happy cleaning floors, huh?" Maya left without a word. Outside, the sky looked darker than usual. Like it knew. She sat on a bench near the south gate, her fingers shaking as she refreshed her name on the search bar. There were hundreds of posts, thousands of retweets, messages from strangers praising her, others mocking her, dissecting her, doubting her very existence. And that's when the fear started to set in. She had never asked for this, never demanded a spotlight. All she wanted was to be seen, not searched. That night, the janitorial supervisor called Maya Ellison into his office. "We've received some calls," he said flatly. "About your daughter." Lorraine clenched her jaw. "She's not bothering anyone." "I didn't say she was. But corporate's nervous. Something about her using school property to write code?" Lorraine stared. "You mean the whiteboard? She's not even supposed to be near those rooms unsupervised. This could cost both of you your jobs." Lorraine stood slowly. "You're telling me my daughter's too smart to sweep floors now?" The supervisor didn't answer. When Maya heard, she went silent. Not angry, not defensive, just hollow. Theo found her outside the student center that evening, sitting alone on the stairs. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't look up. "They're saying I cheated." "I know. They said I hacked into a university lab. I've never even logged into a computer here. I don't have the password. I don't have a badge."
Theo sat beside her.
Unsure of what to say. Then softly, "They know you didn't cheat. That's what scares them." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were full of something heavier than sadness. It was betrayal and exhaustion. "All I did was solve something," she said, "and suddenly I'm a problem." Theo opened his backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside it was a printout, the same screenshot he'd received from the anonymous whistleblower. "What's this?" Maya asked. "Proof," he said. "From someone inside the AI department. They saved the internal server logs." She unfolded it slowly. The document showed a late-night submission of original code to the university's AI terminal. Time-stamped. Unregistered device. Unregistered ID. The solution matched hers. Exactly. Her initials were right there. M. She clutched the paper like it was oxygen. "They deleted the official logs," Theo added, "but not before someone saved this. You left a fingerprint, Maya. And now we've got it." She stared at the page, then at him. "They'll still deny it," she whispered. "They'll say it's fake, that I stole it. They'll say anything but the truth." Theo nodded. "Then we go bigger." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean we don't wait for them to do the right thing. We show the world why they're lying." Her breath hitched. "That's dangerous." "Yeah," he said. "But so is staying quiet." And then the twist. While Maya was reading the file again, Theo's phone buzzed. He glanced down. A new email. Same anonymous sender. Subject: "They've started deleting everything." Attached was a screenshot of the university's digital asset logs. One line blinked red. "Purge pending. AI Archive 0117. Amilary. Prototype." Theo's face went pale. "They're trying to erase the algorithm," he muttered. Maya's heart dropped. "They're not just denying me," she said slowly. "They're destroying the evidence." She looked up, voice trembling with realization. "They're about to erase my name from history." But then a whistleblower from the AI department sent Theo an anonymous email with undeniable proof. The email Theo received didn't just confirm what he already suspected. It detonated everything he thought he understood about Ivy Ridge's prestige. The attached file contained system logs from the university's private AI server, files that had supposedly been wiped clean just days earlier. But someone on the inside had seen what was about to be erased and chose to intervene. The log was short, clinical, undeniable. Entry ID, UNR, timestamp 0. File type algorithmic model, recursive adaptive logic. Status, access. Unauthorized. Device, external, unregistered. Theo froze. The timestamp matched perfectly with the night Maya had filled the board. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't hearsay. This was institutional evidence that someone, not on payroll, not on record, not in their elite circles, had submitted a functioning version of the algorithm through the university's own network. And they were trying to delete it. Maya stared at the screen in disbelief. For a moment her mind raced backward, through every hallway she'd cleaned, every chalkboard she'd silently studied, every eye that had skimmed past her. The system that ignored her had unknowingly recorded her name in its veins. The truth had lived inside the machine that never saw her. "They logged it," she whispered. "They knew." Theo's voice was tight, and they tried to bury it. They knew time was short. Mallory's digital purge request was pending, which meant the archive could vanish at any moment, taking Maya's signature, her timestamp, her proof, into oblivion. Theo immediately backed up the logs on an external drive. Then he did what most freshmen wouldn't dare. He emailed the logs to two journalists, one from Wired and another from Tech Justice Weekly, both known for exposing academic corruption. Within hours, replies flooded in. Need to confirm origin. Source willing to speak. Legal will need protection. But they weren't the only ones watching. The following morning, Maya was called into the Dean of Conduct's office, a place she didn't even know existed until then. She was escorted by a security officer and sat down in a room colder than the winter air outside. Lorraine wasn't allowed inside. The dean, a woman with pale eyes and a polite but performative smile, folded her hands across a manila folder. We understand you may have accessed university systems without authorization, she said in a flat tone. This could constitute a violation of our cybersecurity policy. Potential grounds for permanent expulsion or legal action. Maya blinked. I'm not even a student here. That doesn't exempt you from university policy, the dean replied. You were on campus property, using equipment that belongs to the university. Maya's lips parted, but no words came. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She wasn't a hacker. She didn't even own a laptop. All she had done was write code, by hand. Her only crime was solving something. She realized, in that moment, this wasn't about rules. It was about erasure. She looked the dean in the eyes. Is this because I'm not one of yours? The woman didn't flinch. This is about protocol. Maya clenched her fists. Back outside, Lorraine stood waiting, eyes wide with fear. What did they say? They're threatening charges, Maya said, her voice numb. For breaking into their system. For using a whiteboard. Lorraine's breath hitched. You didn't steal anything. I know. They just want to scare you quiet. I know. That evening, Theo received his own warning. An email from the university's legal team. Mr. Macklin, your recent online activity constitutes a breach of conduct. Cease and desist from distributing internal university materials. Continued behavior may result in disciplinary review or expulsion. Theo read it 3 times. Then once more. They weren't bluffing. They were going to try and silence him too. Not for lying, but for telling the truth too loudly. He forwarded the email to the journalists. They're trying to shut us up. One responded instantly. Exactly the story we needed. Now it's personal. By midnight, Maya's name was back in the news. This time with screenshots, timestamps, and side-by-side code comparisons proving her submission. And just as quickly, the university fired back. They released a counter-statement titled, Anonymous Hoax and Ongoing Internal Investigation. It claimed their systems had been compromised by external actors, and warned the public not to jump to conclusions. They emphasized that no one could verify the identity of it, but the public wasn't buying it anymore. Coders around the world were breaking down the leaked logs, and confirming the match. A former Ivy Ridge student published a blog exposing Mallory's history of intellectual favoritism, and the department's culture of selective mentorship. Another claimed her own work had been dismissed because she was too emotional in her approach, echoing the same logic Mallory had once used to dismiss intuitive models. And yet, despite growing support, Maya felt her world collapsing. Because none of it changed one reality. Her future, her safety, was now at risk. She couldn't sleep. Every creak in the hallway felt like a footstep from someone with papers and threats. Her mother cried quietly in the next room. They both knew the unspoken truth. Institutions like Ivy Ridge didn't just fail to protect girls like Maya. They punished them for surviving. At one point, Maya turned to Theo, eyes hollow. What if I made it worse? What if I lose everything you helped give me? He answered gently. You never asked for anything. You earned it. But I'm not supposed to have it, she whispered. They built this place so people like me never got here. Theo's eyes burned. Then it's time we tear some of that down. But Maya stayed silent for a long moment. She thought about her mother scrubbing floors that would never remember her footprints. She thought about being laughed at, erased, doubted. She thought about how even after proof, they still refused to believe her. Maybe they never would. And maybe the worst part wasn't the disbelief. Maybe it was the familiarity of it. The way this kind of pain already felt like home. And now she stood at a threshold. Stay silent and safe, fade back into invisibility, or speak up and risk losing the only stability her family had ever known. Theo could see the decision building behind her eyes, but he said nothing. Because this choice, finally, was hers alone to make. Maya had to decide, stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk it all. Maya stood in front of the towering wrought iron gates of Ivy Ridge University, her palms cold, her pulse thudding against her ribs like an unrelenting drum. Behind her, Theo held a stack of printed documents, system logs, timestamps, proof, and just a step behind them, wearing a faded blue cleaning uniform and a clenched jaw, stood Maya Ellison, silent but fierce. The cameras blinked to life. Reporters leaned in. Microphones, once so distant from Maya's world, now hovered inches from her lips. The small wooden podium had been borrowed from a community center down the street. The sound system barely worked, but Maya's voice didn't need a megaphone. She stepped up, spine straight. "I never asked to be here," she began, her voice steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "But when you solve something the world says you shouldn't be able to understand, you stop being invisible." The reporters leaned closer. "I solved an algorithm that machines couldn't," she continued. "Not because I had the best equipment, not because I had a team behind me, but because I saw what everyone else ignored, including me." Behind the cameras, a growing crowd gathered. Students, staff, local activists. Maya's story had already traveled across the internet. But this moment, made it human, real. She held up the university log printout. "This is my fingerprint. This is the proof they tried to delete." Then she pointed at the locked gates behind her. "And that," she said, voice sharpening, "is what they used to try and keep people like me out." The moment cracked open. Flashes burst from every direction. Reporters yelled over each other. Lorraine reached out and gently squeezed Maya's shoulder, grounding her. Theo stepped forward to speak next, reading excerpts from the anonymous emails they had received, including the purge logs, the deleted access entries, and the departmental memos, framing Maya as an unauthorized operator. The public reaction was immediate. By evening, Maya's face was on the front page of national newspapers. Time ran a digital cover, the coder they tried to erase. NPR featured her on their evening segment. From janitor's daughter to algorithm architect. Overnight, she went from someone who mopped floors to someone who had swept away decades of exclusion. But with visibility came backlash. Maya's phone buzzed nonstop with messages, some supportive, others venomous. Anonymous numbers sent her texts like, "You don't belong in this space. Affirmative action fraud. Go back to scrubbing." Trolls posted doctored images of her on forums. Conspiracy theorists claimed she was a plant, funded by political activists to dismantle academic integrity. One thread went viral suggesting Theo had fed her the code. The university released another statement, a sterile robotic deflection. "We are aware of the recent press conference and the information circulating on social media. While we value all individuals on our campus, we are currently conducting an internal review of the events and cannot comment further at this time." They didn't deny, but they didn't acknowledge either. The phrase internal review became a punchline online. Memes spread. One showed Mallory holding a magnifying glass with the caption, "Still can't find Maya's credentials." But while the internet laughed, Maya's reality grew heavier. Her mother's hours at the university were suddenly reduced for staffing reasons. Their apartment's landlord received an anonymous complaint about unauthorized media activity on the premises. Maya's inbox filled with requests, demands, threats, praise. One night she broke down. Curled up on the bathroom floor, she whispered to herself, "I just wanted to learn, that's all." Theo found her there an hour later, eyes red. "They're punishing me for being right," she said quietly. "They're punishing you," he replied, "because they spent their whole lives thinking someone like you couldn't be right." Maya looked up at him. "What if they don't stop? What if this never ends?" He knelt beside her. "Then we keep walking. One step at a time. We don't stop either." The next day, Maya received a letter in the mail. Cream envelope. Gold seal. No return address. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a handwritten note. "Maya Ellison, we've been watching with great interest. Your approach to adaptive recursive modeling has implications far beyond academic puzzles. It has the potential to reshape how we think about ethical, accessible AI. I would like to invite you to Washington to meet with my office. The conversation around artificial intelligence should include voices like yours, especially those who have been left out of the room for too long. Please call the number below if you're interested. Chief Technology Officer, United States." Maya read the letter twice, then a third time. Her chest tightened, her throat burned. "Washington," she whispered. Theo took the letter from her hands, reading it in stunned silence. Her mother stepped into the room, apron still on, grease on her fingers. What's that? Maya looked at her, eyes wide. Mama, the White House wants to meet. Lorraine's hand went to her mouth. For a long time, none of them said anything, because some moments were too big for words. Then came a surprise invitation from the White House's chief technology officer. 9. A seat at the table she was never meant to sit at. Word count. The walls of the conference room in Washington gleamed with polished wood and ambition. Mahogany tables stretched across the center, surrounded by leather chairs too deep and too expensive to feel comfortable. The room buzzed with quiet authority, the kind that made people forget how to blink, the kind that Maya Ellison had never imagined standing in, let alone speaking within. But there she sat, Maya the janitor's daughter, flanked by policy advisors, top executives from Silicon Valley, government officials, and a small circle of academic power players, flown in for what had been labeled a national roundtable on equity and ethics in artificial intelligence. She was the only one in the room, without a degree, and yet all eyes were on her. The invitation from the White House's chief technology officer had been real, confirmed, funded, coordinated. Maya had arrived with Theo and Lorraine, flown in by federal travel clearance. She'd worn a simple gray blazer over a second-hand dress shirt. Lorraine had ironed it herself, her hands trembling as she did. This doesn't make sense, Maya had whispered on the plane. It makes history, her mother replied. The round table began with polished speeches. The CTO herself, a brilliant black woman named Nadine Brooks, opened the floor with clear purpose. We cannot build systems that reflect society, she said, if the builders all come from the same corner of it. Then came the introductions. Harvard, MIT, Google, defense contractors, think tanks. And then, finally, Maya Ellison, independent researcher, Ivy Ridge community. There was a pause after her name. Not long, but long enough to sting. Maya stood, thanked the room, and gave a measured, poised breakdown of her solution, the adaptive recursion model that had defied AI's limits. She avoided theatrics. She spoke like someone who'd earned the right to be heard, not someone begging for attention. But halfway through her explanation, a man from a major tech firm leaned back in his chair, arms folded. He didn't bother to hide the skepticism in his eyes. So, he interrupted, with a half smirk, you really wrote this on your own? No assistance? The air in the room thinned. Maya tilted her head slightly. Would you ask that question if I were wearing a Stanford hoodie? A few people chuckled nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably. But Maya didn't flinch. She pulled out a USB drive and passed it to the CTO's assistant. I wrote a secondary version on the flight over, she said calmly. A variation that applies emotional variance prediction in ethical machine learning. If anyone has access to a simulation runner, I'd like to show it. The assistant connected it to the projection monitor. What followed was 10 minutes of silence, broken only by the clicking of keys and the stunned looks on faces that had grown far too used to hearing themselves speak. Her logic model not only worked, it improved outcomes in biased AI detection by 27%. A leading scholar from Yale audibly whispered, "Oh my God," as the results finalized on screen. When it was over, Maya sat back down without a word. No one asked if she'd written it herself again. Instead, the questions that followed turned into something else entirely. How had she taught herself? How had the system overlooked her? How many more Mayas existed, buried under bad lighting and worse assumptions? Theo sat in the gallery, quietly watching the room adjust to her presence in real time. They had walked in expecting a headline, and walked out seeing a peer. And yet, Maya felt no relief, no arrival. Because back home, in the halls that raised her, someone else was preparing his next move. At Ivy Ridge University, Professor Dwight Mallory was not watching the live stream. He was in his office, alone, door locked, lines drawn. On his desk were 2 manila folders and 1 burning resentment. Inside the first folder, the official inquiry from the Department of Education, requesting access to internal AI server logs. The government was investigating. Inside the second, a printout of Maya's original chalkboard logic, recovered from a student's deleted Dropbox folder. And on his laptop, a draft of a statement, one he intended to leak anonymously. It read, "The so-called Maya Ellison solution bears striking resemblance to a collaborative student research effort previously submitted to my lab. Given the sensitive nature of intellectual property, Further claims by unverified individuals should be approached with skepticism. Mallory paused, then added a line at the end. This appears to be a well-coordinated deception, exploiting the national appetite for diversity narratives. He didn't need proof. He just needed doubt. Maya had become dangerous, not just because she was smart, but because she made the gatekeepers look small. And Mallory had no intention of surrendering his legacy to a girl who once cleaned his whiteboard. As the cursor blinked on his screen, Mallory clicked Save Draft. Outside his door, the wind howled through the campus trees. Inside, he planned a digital smear campaign disguised as academic concern. Yet back at the university, Professor Mallory prepared to launch a campaign to discredit her once and for all. The walls of the conference room in Washington gleamed with polished wood and ambition. Mahogany tables stretched across the center, surrounded by leather chairs too deep and too expensive to feel comfortable. The room buzzed with quiet authority, the kind that made people forget how to blink, the kind that Maya Ellison had never imagined standing in, let alone speaking within. But there she sat, Maya, the janitor's daughter, flanked by policy advisors, top executives from Silicon Valley, government officials, and a small circle of academic power players, flown in for what had been labeled a national roundtable on equity and ethics in artificial intelligence. She was the only one in the room, without a degree, and yet all eyes were on her. The invitation from the White House's chief technology officer had been real. Confirmed, funded, coordinated. Maya had arrived with Theo and Lorraine, flown in by federal travel clearance. She'd worn a simple gray blazer over a second-hand dress shirt. Lorraine had ironed it herself, her hands trembling as she did. "This doesn't make sense," Maya had whispered on the plane.
"It makes history," her mother replied.
The round table began with polished speeches. The CTO herself, a brilliant black woman named Nadine Brooks, opened the floor with clear purpose. "We cannot build systems that reflect society," she said, "if the builders all come from the same corner of it." Then came the introductions. Harvard, MIT, Google, defense contractors, think tanks. And then, finally, Maya Ellison, independent researcher, Ivy Ridge community. There was a pause after her name, not long but long enough to sting. Maya stood, thanked the room, and gave a measured, poised breakdown of her solution, the adaptive recursion model that had defied AI's limits. She avoided theatrics. She spoke like someone who'd earned the right to be heard, not someone begging for attention. But halfway through her explanation, a man from a major tech firm leaned back in his chair, arms folded. He didn't bother to hide the skepticism in his eyes. "So," he interrupted, with a half smirk, "you really wrote this on your own? No assistance?" The air in the room thinned. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Would you ask that question if I were wearing a Stanford hoodie?" A few people chuckled nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably. But Maya didn't flinch. She pulled out a USB drive and passed it to the CTO's assistant. "I wrote a secondary version on the flight over," she said calmly. "A variation that applies emotional variance prediction in ethical machine learning. If anyone has access to a simulation runner, I'd like to show it." The assistant connected it to the projection monitor. What followed was 10 minutes of silence, broken only by the clicking of keys and the stunned looks on faces that had grown far too used to hearing themselves speak. Her logic model not only worked, it improved outcomes in biased AI detection by 27%. A leading scholar from Yale audibly whispered, "Oh my God," as the results finalized on screen. When it was over, Maya sat back down without a word. No one asked if she'd written it herself again. Instead, the questions that followed turned into something else entirely. How had she taught herself? How had the system overlooked her? How many more Mayas existed, buried under bad lighting and worse assumptions? Theo sat in the gallery, quietly watching the room adjust to her presence in real time. They had walked in expecting a headline, and walked out seeing a peer. And yet Maya felt no relief, no arrival. Because back home, in the halls that raised her, someone else was preparing his next move. At Ivy Ridge University, Professor Dwight Mallory was not watching the live stream. He was in his office, alone, door locked, blinds drawn. On his desk were 2 manila folders and 1 burning resentment. Inside the first folder, the official inquiry from the Department of Education requesting access to internal AI server logs. The government was investigating. Inside the second, a printout of Maya's original chalkboard logic, recovered from a student's deleted Dropbox folder. And on his laptop, a draft of a statement one he intended to leak anonymously. It read, "The so-called Maya Ellison solution bears striking resemblance to a collaborative student research effort previously submitted to my lab. Given the sensitive nature of intellectual property, further claims by unverified individuals should be approached with skepticism." Mallory paused, then added a line at the end. "This appears to be a well-coordinated deception, exploiting the national appetite for diversity narratives." He didn't need proof. He just needed doubt. Maya had become dangerous, not just because she was smart, but because she made the gatekeepers look small. And Mallory had no intention of surrendering his legacy to a girl who once cleaned his whiteboard. As the cursor blinked on his screen, Mallory clicked Save Draft. Outside his door, the wind howled through the campus trees. Inside, he planned a digital smear campaign, disguised as academic concern. Yet back at the university, Professor Mallory prepared to launch a campaign to discredit her once and for all. The attacks didn't start with facts. They never do. They started with whispers, strategic, sharpened, and designed to rot belief from the inside out. 2 days after Maya's visit to the White House, a video surfaced online. It was grainy and edited, showing Maya scribbling on a whiteboard late at night. The footage was clipped to exclude context. No audio, no timestamps, no mention of who had recorded it or how. It made her look like she was sneaking in. The caption read, "Caught unauthorized student modifies university AI code. Theft or fraud." The video had all the hallmarks of manufactured controversy, but the timing was perfect. Conservative influencers jumped on it immediately. Tech commentators began asking if Maya had gained access to privileged data. One viral post called her the Rachel Dolezal of coding. Another read, "This is what happens when you prioritize diversity over discipline." Within 24 hours, hashtags flipped. Me solved it was joined by a darker tag. Maya exposed. Maya didn't understand how fast things could shift until she checked her inbox. What had once been filled with congratulations was now poisoned by threats. "We know where you live. Hope you like being famous, liar. They'll make you pay for stealing white men's work." The tone of her world shifted. Suddenly she wasn't an icon. She was a controversy. She hadn't even had time to process the climb before she was shoved down the other side of the mountain. Back at Ivy Ridge, Lorraine Ellison was summoned to Human Resources. They told her janitorial position was being reevaluated due to operational restructuring. No clear explanation, no warnings, just a sterile notice wrapped in corporate language. "I've been cleaning your damn science wing for 19 years, she told the HR rep, her voice trembling with rage. "And now that my daughter outsmarted you, I'm a liability." The woman didn't answer, just handed her a form and looked away. When Maya heard, she was silent for nearly a full minute. Then, "It's my fault." "No," Lorraine said firmly, gripping her hand. "It's their fault. Every part of this is their fault." But the pressure began to break Maya open from the inside. Her days blurred. She stopped responding to journalists. Emails from black tech organizations went unread. At night, she lay awake, the noise of hate flooding through her cracked phone screen. She tried deleting the apps. It didn't help. Even her scholarship offers, 4 of them, were now on hold, pending clarification of allegations. "They're not waiting for truth," Theo said quietly one night. "They're waiting for you to give up." Maya didn't respond. Her body was in the room, but her mind wasn't. She felt like a glitch in a system that had always been programmed to crash people like her. Then came the breakdown. It was small, quiet, no camera crews, no drama, just Maya curled into herself on the bathroom floor again. But this time, even her breath was silent. Lorraine found her an hour later, eyes open, but distant. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered. "I know, baby. I didn't lie. I know. They don't want me here." Lorraine pulled her into her arms, brushing her hair back. "Then stay anyway." Maya didn't respond. She didn't have it in her. But the next morning, something happened that shattered the numbness. Outside Ivy Ridge's campus gates, a group of girls, maybe 10, maybe 12, stood holding cardboard signs. Each one had hand-drawn code across the top, beneath which was a message in marker. "We code, because Maya did. Maya taught me that black girls belong here. She solved what you couldn't." They weren't yelling. They weren't angry. They were just standing. And Maya saw them. Her chest cracked open. Not because of the hate, she was used to that, but because of the hope. She walked slowly across the pavement, stopped just in front of the gate. One of the younger girls held up a laptop. Screen turned to her. Maya's code was on it. You taught me about recursion, the girl said shyly. Maya couldn't speak. Her throat locked. She crouched down, took the girl's hand and whispered, "Don't let them shrink you. Ever." And with that, the fire returned. She went home, washed her face, opened her laptop, and started again. Theo arrived not long after. "They're trying to crush you," he said, as he stepped inside. "Then let's give them something heavier to carry," she replied. Together they began compiling every piece of data, every saved draft, every proof of authorship Maya had created, from the original napkin drawings to server log screenshots. They backed it all up, encrypted it, time-stamped it. Theo contacted the journalists again and told them to prepare. Then came the twist neither of them expected. While organizing the documents, Theo opened one of the old folders they had grabbed from the university's shared drive, a forgotten file dump left by a student who'd once worked under Mallory. It was supposed to be unrelated, just clutter. But buried deep inside was a directory labeled Warren Mallory and Turner. Legacy Models, AI Prototype. Theo opened it. What he saw made his blood run cold. The code inside, Mallory's original algorithm, was nearly identical to the structure Maya had solved. Not just similar in theory, identical in architecture. And the date stamp? 7 years ago. But what stood out even more was the metadata, an author tag embedded into the source code by mistake. It read, Author Dr. Harold Denton. Theo's jaw tightened. "Maya," he called. She walked over, eyes scanning the screen. Her voice was flat. "That's the man from my mother's closet." "What?" She nodded slowly. "An old book. She saved it from being thrown out. He was a black researcher. His work was buried." Theo sat down, stunned. Mallory didn't just build an impossible problem. He stole it. He rebranded it, added a recursive trap, and erased the source. Maya stared at the screen. So the truth was even deeper than she realized. She hadn't just solved the unsolvable. She had resurrected a buried genius. And Mallory, the man who accused her of theft, had been standing on stolen ground the entire time. And then, Mallory made one fatal mistake. He left his original algorithm files unsecured. The moment Theo opened the metadata and saw Dr. Harold Denton's name, the entire foundation of the controversy shifted beneath him. His stomach turned, not from surprise, but from the weight of what it meant. This wasn't just about Maya being discredited. It was about something much older, something planned, something stolen. He turned to Maya, still seated beside him, her face unreadable. "This man," he said quietly, "Denton, he's the real architect." Maya nodded. "I remember the book. My mom pulled it from a bin marked outdated faculty materials. Denton had tried to publish a new model, but the university never backed him, said his work lacked academic rigor." Theo traced the source file with trembling fingers. Inside were handwritten notes Mallory had scanned and stored digitally, annotations, modifications, crossed-out equations, all bearing timestamps older than Mallory's tenure at Ivy Ridge. The truth was undeniable. Mallory had plagiarized the core of his unsolvable algorithm from a forgotten black scholar and deliberately buried the name that wrote it. And Maya? She hadn't just solved a puzzle. She had resurrected a stolen legacy. Theo's fury grew with every line he read. They hadn't just tried to erase Maya. They had erased Harold Denton, long before her. What the world celebrated as Mallory's genius was the graveyard of black brilliance, polished and repackaged by a man who'd built his entire career on the bones of someone denied. They stared at the screen for a long time, neither speaking. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "They'll never admit this." "No," Theo said, "but we will." He copied every relevant file, encrypted them, and created a secure archive. Screenshots, comparison models, metadata, email logs. He left no room for denial. Then he drafted a message. In 1997, Dr. Harold Denton submitted a recursive logic model to Ivy Ridge University. It was dismissed. Years later, that model was stolen, modified, and claimed as original work by Professor Dwight Mallory. Maya Ellison did not solve a puzzle. She uncovered a theft, and we have the proof. Theo posted it anonymously through a whistleblower account, linked to an independent academic watchdog group. Within minutes, the files were downloaded hundreds of times. A few hours later, they were being dissected on Reddit. GitHub, and STEM Twitter. The impact was nuclear. Every major tech blog ran with the story. Stolen genius Ivy Ridge AI professor accused of plagiarizing black researcher. From erased to exposed. The truth behind the algorithm. Mallory's lie. The algorithm was never hit. News anchors called it the biggest academic fraud of the decade. Commentators debated whether Mallory should be stripped of tenure, banned from publishing, or criminally investigated for intellectual theft. Students flooded campus forums demanding his resignation. And for the first time since the story broke, Maya wasn't the one on trial. The university scrambled to contain the fallout. They released a hastily written press release claiming they had just learned of troubling allegations and were committed to thoroughly investigating the historical records of their faculty research. But it was too late. The documents were everywhere. Maya didn't speak publicly. She let the proof speak for itself. But behind closed doors, she stared at Denton's notes in silence, a weight pressing on her chest. He died without anyone knowing, she whispered. He died thinking he failed. You brought him back, Theo said. And the world's going to remember him now. Through you. The emotional toll was staggering. But for the first time, the pain wasn't isolating. It was shared. It belonged to a community, a lineage, a story rewritten in real time. Still, not everyone turned instantly. There were deniers, of course. Pundits accused Maya and Theo of fabricating the files. Others said the leak was timed too perfectly and suggested political motives. A few even questioned whether Dr. Harold Denton had ever existed. But something had changed. Because this time, even the university's own faculty began to shift. Tenured professors, some of whom had remained silent for decades, started speaking out. A former associate of Mallory's published a blog confessing she had long suspected he'd borrowed work from marginalized voices. Another senior lecturer posted an open letter titled, "Our silence was complicity." And then came the shock that sealed it all. An elderly black professor from the math department, Dr. Lena Cartwright, stood before a packed press conference and revealed that she had worked with Harold Denton in the 90s. His papers were denied funding, she said, not because they lacked rigor, but because he lacked the right skin. Her voice trembled. I tried to protect his work, but the institution buried him and rewarded the man who stole it. The room fell silent. Maya watched it live from home, tears falling down her cheeks. She didn't cry often, not even when the threats came, not when the scholarships paused, not even when the world called her a liar. But this broke something open inside her. Dr. Denton, she whispered. This should have been yours. Theo leaned beside her, quiet. Now it is. But they both knew Mallory wasn't done. His silence was too strategic. His ego too large to go down without a fight. And sure enough, behind the scenes, Mallory began contacting allies. Emails leaked, showing him urging colleagues to consider the political cost of overreacting to digital sensationalism. He called Maya's work dangerously anecdotal, and labeled the allegations against him a witch hunt driven by social justice extremism. But this time, the old tools didn't work. The lies cracked under the weight of too much truth. And Maya, she didn't back down. Not anymore. The university scrambled to contain it. But now, even tenured professors began to turn on Mallory. The petition began with 6 signatures. 6 professors, quiet, tenured, risk-averse, who had taught in the shadows of Mallory's legacy for years. Some of them had known about the whispers, some had dismissed them. But when the evidence became public, they could no longer sit in comfort behind closed office doors. Within 48 hours, the number of signatures grew to 32. The open letter they signed was clear, measured and damning. We, the undersigned faculty of Ivy Ridge University, demand the immediate resignation of Professor Dwight Mallory for ethical misconduct, intellectual theft, and violation of the academic integrity expected of this institution. Furthermore, we urge the university to issue a formal apology to Maya Ellison and posthumously acknowledge the original work of Dr. Harold Denton. It went viral. News outlets published it in full. Students printed copies and taped them to hallway doors and lecture hall walls. The momentum turned physical. Hundreds of students staged a silent sit-in outside Mallory's lab. They wore t-shirts with Maya's initials printed across the front. M.E. They held up signs that read, "This hall was built on stolen genius, and you taught us to code. We're teaching you to listen." At night, anonymous artists painted a mural across the side of the old AI building. A portrait of Maya with her chalk in hand, facing a wall of equations that dissolved into stardust. Beneath it in bold black paint, "We remember what you tried to erase." The university tried to downplay the unrest, but the donations told a different story. Alumni began pulling endowments. Ivy Ridge's biggest donor, a tech billionaire who had invested heavily in Mallory's programs, issued a public statement: "I will not fund institutions that silence black innovation." For the first time in its history, Ivy Ridge faced both a moral and financial reckoning. And finally, under immense pressure, the administration acted. Professor Dwight Mallory was placed on indefinite leave, pending investigation. No handshakes. No ceremony, just a line in an email, and a name removed from the faculty directory. Outside the administration building, students erupted in cheers. Reporters flooded the scene. Hashtag soared again. But Maya didn't celebrate. When asked for comment, she stood at the same spot where she had once given her first public statement, and said, "This was never about one man. This was about the systems that allowed him to rise while others were buried. One firing doesn't fix a culture. And I'm not done." The reporters fell silent. Because Maya didn't speak like a girl overwhelmed by fame anymore. She spoke like a leader. Clear, steady, unafraid. Lorraine stood beside her, head held high, watching her daughter become something the world had once refused to see. Not a prodigy, not a protest, but a presence. Theo stood on the edges of the crowd, quietly proud. He had learned to let Maya take the front now. It was her voice the world needed. His role was not to speak for her, but to stand with her. Behind closed doors, Mallory was furious. His email inbox overflowed with rejections. Lectures canceled, journals suspending his submissions, collaborators ghosting him. He wasn't being silenced. He was being exiled. But he still had one thing left: lawyers. In a final act of defiance, Mallory issued a countersuit, claiming defamation, false attribution, and emotional distress. He accused Maya and Theo of hacking, intellectual manipulation, and cyberbullying. The university, eager to avoid more press, didn't stop him. And so, in the same week, Maya had watched her mother's job reinstated and her own name restored. She received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside, a legal notice. She was being sued. For a full minute, she didn't move. Lorraine read it beside her, lips tightening with every word. "They're trying to drag you back into the dark," she said. "They want to break you in the place you just stood tall." Maya folded the letter slowly. Her chest felt tight, but not with fear, with fire. "They won't," she said. "I won't let them." And so she did what they never expected. She countersued, but not for herself. She filed a case in federal court, backed by a coalition of civil rights attorneys, tech watchdogs, and academic justice advocates, accusing Ivy Ridge University and Professor Dwight Mallory systemic racial bias in academic publishing, intellectual theft and suppression of black research, retaliatory threats against a whistleblower. It was no longer just about an algorithm. It was about everything that algorithm represented: erasure, elitism, and the myth of meritocracy, in a system built to exclude. Maya Ellison had gone from janitor's daughter to digital revolutionary. Now she was something even more dangerous to those who feared her: a plaintiff. And the court date was set, and change was coming. From the courtroom. The courthouse was nothing like Ivy Ridge. It was older, colder, and creaked with every step, but Maya preferred it that way. There were no marble floors here, no polished portraits of donors, just rows of pews, a worn American flag, and a jury box filled with strangers who had never heard of recursion or algorithmic bias. They didn't need to. This wasn't about code anymore. This was about truth. Maya sat between two attorneys from the Equal Access Legal Foundation, a non-profit that had taken on her case after the story went viral. Across the aisle, Mallory's legal team sat in clean, expensive suits, their expressions unreadable. Mallory himself appeared composed, his hair grayer, but his pride fully intact. The case was historic, not just for what it alleged, but for what it revealed. Ellison versus Ivy Ridge University, and Dwight Mallory. The lawsuit accused both parties of systemic racial discrimination, suppression of black academic contributions, intellectual property theft, retaliation, and malicious defamation. When Maya filed the complaint, most thought the school would settle quietly, quickly, to make it all go away. But Ivy Ridge chose war. And so, the trial began. The opening arguments were a study in contrast. Maya's attorney, a sharp, measured woman named Mariah Gaines, stood with fire and dignity. "This case is not about one algorithm," she told the jury. It's about a culture that rewards plagiarism when the victim is invisible. It's about a system that stole from a dead black scientist, buried the theft, and then tried to destroy the girl who uncovered it. Mallory's defense came in the form of polished phrases, disputed authorship, misunderstood events, unfounded accusations, fueled by internet chaos. But the evidence told its own story. Day by day, the courtroom transformed into a confession booth. Former faculty members stepped forward, some nervously, others defiantly, to admit they had raised concerns about bias in Mallory's department over the years. None were taken seriously. A few had been pressured into silence. One testimony stood out. A black lab technician, who once worked under Mallory, quietly stated, "I saw Denton's name on the early drafts. I brought it up once. I was told, he's gone and we're moving forward. I never mentioned it again." Emails were presented, notes, time-stamped drafts, screenshots from internal faculty chats referring to Maya as an embarrassment waiting to happen. It wasn't just an algorithm that had been stolen. It was a legacy. Maya's turn to testify came in the second week. The courtroom packed with reporters. Students watched via live stream from campus auditoriums. Outside, protesters and supporters alike stood in the rain, holding signs and umbrellas. She took the stand slowly. Her posture was upright, but her voice was soft when she started. "I never meant to be here," she said. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to learn to understand something I saw on a board while sweeping floors." She paused, then continued, stronger. "They say I broke into systems. I didn't. I used my eyes. I used my mind. I used my silence because for most of my life that's all the world ever let me keep." Her gaze swept over the jury. "I didn't hack anything. I built something. And then I realized it wasn't just about the math. It was about why no one thought someone like me could do the math." She told them about her childhood, about watching her mother mop halls filled with brilliance she wasn't allowed to touch, about finding Dr. Denton's book in a discarded bin, about seeing her solution erased in seconds. And finally, she told them what they took from her. Not just credit, she said, but the right to be seen as someone who belonged. There was no applause, no gasps, just silence, the kind that feels heavier than noise. Mallory's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, suggesting Maya had exaggerated the connection between her model and the original code, that there were multiple ways to reach the same computational conclusions. But the technical witnesses disagreed. Dr. Lena Cartwright, now retired, testified with clarity and weight. Maya Ellison not only built on Harold Denton's work, she honored it. And unlike Mallory, she never erased his name. Even Mallory's longtime assistant took the stand and admitted that yes, Denton's name had appeared in early drafts. And yes, it had been intentionally removed. With every day, the cracks in Mallory's defense widened. But Maya didn't smile. Not once. Because she knew verdicts don't always follow facts, especially when power is at stake. As the closing arguments wrapped, the entire courtroom felt taut with expectation. Mariah Gaines ended with a simple statement. "If we don't recognize Maya Ellison now, we risk proving that no matter how hard black brilliance works, the system will always find a way to lock the door again." The jury was dismissed to deliberate. Hours passed. Maya sat between Theo and Lorraine in the hallway. Her mother's hand gripped hers like a lifeline. Theo said nothing. He just watched her. At one point, Maya whispered, "What if they still don't believe me?" Theo didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We already won. The world heard you." But Maya wanted more than headlines. She wanted justice real, recorded, legal. And then, after 8 hours and 42 minutes, the bailiff stepped out. "The jury has reached a verdict." Maya stood, her breath caught in her chest. She walked into the courtroom, back straight, face calm. The jurors filed in. 12 faces, blank expressions. The judge asked the foreperson to rise, and Maya looked at them, heart pounding like a war drum. The verdict loomed, and the jury's faces revealed nothing. The courtroom held its breath. 12 jurors stood motionless, their faces unreadable. The foreperson stepped forward, a folded slip of paper trembling slightly in her fingers. She handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge unfolded it, read in silence, then looked up. "In the matter of Ellison versus Ivy Ridge University and Dwight Mallory," he said, voice steady, "we find in favor of the plaintiff, Maya Ellison." The room erupted. Lorraine gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. Theo exhaled, his knees buckling with relief. The journalists in the gallery whispered furiously into phones and recorders. But Maya stood frozen, her face unreadable, as the weight of the words crashed over her like a silent tidal wave. She wasn't vindicated in private. She was believed publicly. It wasn't just about her name anymore. It was about the fact that for the first time in her life, a system finally told her she was right. The judge continued, ordering Ivy Ridge University to pay $4 million damages to Maya for defamation, emotional distress, and intellectual theft, fund and establish a permanent public archive, recognizing Dr. Harold Denton's original contributions to recursive adaptive modeling, issue a formal, written and video recorded apology, acknowledging Maya's solution, the institutional failure to credit her, and the cultural gatekeeping that enabled Mallory's fraud. Mallory sat stone-faced, staring at the floor, his career in smoldering ruins. Maya turned to her mother, gripping her hand. Lorraine whispered through tears, "You did this, baby. You did this for all of us." But Maya didn't cry. She just nodded, slowly, deeply, like someone watching the earth rotate for the first time. The ruling ignited a fire across academia. Within weeks, several major universities opened investigations into their own intellectual property disputes. Black and indigenous scholars came forward with stories of buried research, unpublished theories, mentorships that became thefts. The Denton Rule, a new policy modeled after Maya's case, was adopted by 3 Ivy League institutions, requiring full metadata tracking on all internal research drafts and public crediting of contributor lineage. Podcasts, documentaries, and lectures began telling Maya's story. The girl who solved it became shorthand for a generation of students who had been underestimated, overlooked, and underserved. But Maya remained grounded. When asked by a news anchor how she would spend the settlement money, her answer was immediate. "I'm creating a scholarship. Not for me, but for every coder, engineer, mathematician, and quiet genius who's ever had their brilliance questioned before they opened their mouth." The ME Code Foundation launched 6 months later, focused entirely on underrepresented youth in tech. No test scores, no tuition barriers, just talent, effort, and vision. Applications flooded in. One donor called it the future of fair genius. Maya spoke at the launch, standing beside a mural of Dr. Denton, her hand pressed over her initials. "This isn't about making space," she said. "It's about acknowledging the space we've always occupied, even when no one looked." Theo, now one of the program's lead developers, watched proudly from the crowd. He still preferred quiet corners, but he'd learned that building behind the scenes didn't mean staying silent when it mattered. The university's apology video went viral. The new Ivy Ridge president, the old one resigned in shame, read it on camera. "To Maya Ellison, to the family of Dr. Harold Denton, and to every mind our institution failed to see, we are sorry. You were right. We were wrong. And we are changing, because of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was there. And for the first time, so was Maya. Her name appeared in journals, her work cited in doctoral theses. She co-authored an open-source ethics framework for AI education. Tech conferences now invited her as a keynote speaker, not as a symbol of diversity, but as a standard of excellence. And yet through it all, Maya kept her eyes on what mattered. Every time she passed a janitor's cart, she smiled. Every time she saw a little black girl walk past a classroom window and pause to stare at the board, she made sure to wave. But change, she knew, was not just institutional. It was generational. And then, one day, as she was helping Theo organize old digital archives for a student training module, she stumbled on something strange. It was an unindexed server, a legacy database buried beneath dozens of outdated files in the university's old AI repository. Untouched, unlabeled, almost lost to time. "What's this?" she asked. Theo shrugged. "Could be old thesis work." But Maya had a feeling. She clicked through deeper and deeper, past broken folders and corrupted datasets, until she found it. A string of raw, uncompiled models. Not Mallory's, not Denton's, and not hers, but clearly familiar. The logic wasn't just similar, it was foundational. She opened the metadata. Author D. Year 9. Status denied, access revoked. Theo leaned in. "D. Denton?" Maya asked aloud. "No, wait, that's not right." She scrolled further. A scanned rejection letter was attached, addressed to a Dr. Delilah Evans. "Who's that?" Theo asked. Maya's hands trembled. She came before Denton," she said. "I read her name once in that old book my mom saved." Theo's eyes widened. Then this. Maya closed the laptop gently, her voice steady. We've only scratched the surface. But one final twist remained, buried deep in a forgotten database. Years passed, but the chalk never faded. Not really. Though the board had long since been wiped, and the campus mural had weathered under sunlight and storm, the echo of Maya Ellison's name remained, not just in books or lectures or digital timelines, but in places far more enduring. Because brilliance, when buried, grows roots. And roots don't forget. It was a decade later when the discovery came. A group of doctoral students, working on an audit of legacy AI architecture at a biotech firm in Chicago, stumbled upon a pattern embedded deep inside a sprawling medical algorithm used by hospitals around the world. The model, known for its unusual ability to adapt diagnoses across racially diverse datasets, had earned acclaim in the medical AI community for significantly reducing misdiagnosis rates in Black and brown patients. But none of the current developers could explain how the recursive logic worked. It was too elegant, too intuitive, too human. The students, curious, began tracing the code backward. What they found stunned them: a compact logic loop. Just 62 lines that served as the foundation for the model's adaptive decision tree. Buried in the metadata was a name. Author ME. No university watermark. No institution claim. No linked publication. Just those initials. A whisper inside a machine that had saved millions. They posted about the discovery online, attaching an analysis thread. Whoever wrote this wasn't just brilliant. They saw medicine, race, and pattern recognition as one. It's not just code. It's consciousness. The post went viral overnight, and the world remembered. Again, Maya Ellison, now in her late 30s, was sitting at a cafe in Oakland when the article reached her inbox. She read it once, then again. Her hand moved instinctively to her chest. Theo, sitting across from her, now her husband, her co-founder, her fiercest quiet witness, saw the glimmer in her eyes. It survived, she said. He smiled. You survived? No, she whispered. We did. Across the world, hospitals began crediting her. The ME loop, as it became known, was now a featured case study in AI medicine curricula. Scholars published retrospectives. Awards committees tried belatedly to recognize her. But Maya didn't return to stages. She didn't need spotlights anymore. She had built a world instead. Through the ME Code Foundation, thousands of underrepresented coders had passed through her mentorship. Many now led departments, taught, built, innovated, not because they were discovered, but because they were finally allowed to exist. And still Maya taught, quietly, faithfully. She never stopped writing. Never stopped remembering the weight of chalk in her hand. One morning, while sorting through an old box of notes at the Foundation's learning lab, she found something unexpected: the original napkin she had drawn her first recursive sketch on. The pencil was faded, the edges worn, but the logic was unmistakable. She laughed softly. Where it all began, she said. A young girl in the room, 15, bright-eyed, hair tied in space buns, looked up and asked, "Is that your first algorithm?" Maya handed it to her. It's not mine anymore. It's yours now. And then came the twist. Weeks later, the same PhD group who'd discovered her code published a follow-up article. They had gone back into the archives to trace where her ME loop had first entered the medical pipeline. It hadn't been added by any known researcher. Instead, it was uploaded anonymously through a beta access forum 6 years prior, by a guest user from a public library IP in Alabama. Maya hadn't submitted it, and neither had Theo. The forum logs, old and brittle, held only one clue: a forum username that matched none of the known contributors. Unlime Evans Rising.
Theo gasped.
Maya froze. Delilah Evans, she said, her voice catching. Theo nodded slowly. She finished what you started. Somewhere in the shadows of history, a woman erased before anyone knew her name had passed the flame forward, not out of hope for reward, but out of refusal to be erased again. Maya sat still for a long time after. Then she smiled, soft and deep, like someone who had finally heard the ending to a song she'd spent her life trying to write. She hadn't just changed a university. She had changed the world. Not for attention, not for headlines, but for every mind told it wasn't allowed to matter. And the algorithm she left behind? It did what they never let her do. It lived. They tried to silence Maya, just like they've silenced voices like hers for generations. But the truth couldn't be erased this time. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased, This story was for you. Type yes if you believe brilliance has no color. Subscribe if this broke your heart.